Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for this presentation. We're seeing that we're still waiting for another group of people joining in, so we're going to start in approximately 2 or 3 minutes the webinar. Thank you for your patience. All right, thank you very much all for joining us for the webinar today on making enterprise architecture influential. We are live here from Paris with myself, Yannick Rudloff. I'm Product Management Director for Mega International, and I'm here with my colleague Vittorio, who is pre-sales consultant and EA expert on our OpEx solution.
Hello, everyone.
So very glad to have you all with us today. Very important presentation for us today to make sure that all the practices that we support for enterprise architecture are getting influential and providing value. And so the idea of today and a few objectives that we will share with you today are about demonstrating our, good point, thank you, Vittorio. Demonstrating how EA will deliver measurable business value and become embedded in organizational culture. So the key talking points we're going to talk about today are about EA, of course, and talking about outcomes. So not focusing too much on the technical EA and frameworks, but more talking about what we can get out of our EA program. Driving the change through emerging EA trends. So we're going to talk about capability maps. We're going to talk about these kind of things that will help us as enterprise architects to demonstrate the value for our EA practices, and making sure that we are creating a business impact with a unified vision of the enterprise, which is key as enterprise architects. So what you should walk away from the session today is really talking about business value, talking about transformation, and ensuring that every stakeholders are going to recognize EA's value. All right, let's dive into it. So first of all, we're going to talk about the opportunity. So the opportunity is going to be about, and the first time, sorry, Vittorio, thank you, are going to be about focusing on business outcome. So I call that slide the pitfall because it's usually what we can see with EA programs that are a bit struggling at the beginning, finding the rhythm and finding the best way of focusing on value. It's rather than these programs might be too much focusing on technologies, on frameworks, on I would say the technicalities of EA, and not so much on business outcome. So the reality is that what we think here is really to be able to have EA practices focusing on the problem, prioritizing the use cases, and making sure that we cross-pollinate capabilities whenever we are doing these kind of things. So this is something that we actually see a lot of the time. It's not entirely, I would say, tied to EA and enterprise architecture. This is kind of a global framework that we can see in multiple, I would say, practices. But for EA, it comes very clear because EA can be used as a Swiss Army knives with multiple ways of using it to demonstrate value. So it's very important that from the start, we focus on which problem we want to solve and the business outcome we want to deliver for that. Now, the idea is that when we talk with our customers who are working on, I would say, their EA practice, and when I think about the most successful EA practices that I've seen so far with our clients, it's really when these practices are linked to the business strategy of the company, making sure that when we start from the get-go our EA practice, we are going to be able to realize what we want to achieve as a company and see how the EA approach is really going to help this practice. So this is when we talk about business outcome-driven EA approach. So this is a mindset where we want to think first about what we should deliver, and then we think about what data and how we're going to solve that with our EA practices. And then, of course, we can again reverse engineer that into an EA tool and see how we can actually approach that within the EA tool. And this sometimes is also how we see the practices as an internal management consultancy firm. EAs, when being very successful, are usually, I would say, located or used such as a consultancy firm that is called whenever they need to resolve an issue or realign strategy within the company. So this is when EAs are going to be called to shape a business strategy for a specific problem and solve the problem and innovate on the problem as well. So it's really about connecting business to execution and seeing the EA practice as an internal management consultancy firm. Now, of course, that I would say world-class EA program, there is steps to go to that point, right? It's not something that you're going to build overnight. And this is how at Mega we've came with, I would say, an approach, a framework, a four-step approach, I would say, that's going to help us build that influential EA program that is going to give us that really, I would say, best situation for our EA programs. Usually, when we start these EA practices, we start at the initial phase that you can see here on the left. This is usually when we are at what we call the noisy phase. So EA is being seen as a bit noisy. There is no really personal value at the moment. EA is seen as an extra effort. There's nothing that I would say is going to make the appeal right now for the company at this stage. Now, the goal is from that initial stage to move quickly to the useful stage. You want to build an EA baseline, and what you want to do there is to produce value for a few stakeholders. You're in that case in what we call the push mode, meaning that the EA practice is going to push value to a few select stakeholders and demonstrate that you're going to be useful on helping them tackle some issues that they're dealing with in their different use cases. Now, at this stage, again, you're still pushing the value to someone. The idea from there is to cross-pollinate these use cases that you started to do with the first group to others. And at this stage, this is when the groups are going to talk to each other about how EA helped them. And with a coffee, with the lunch, for instance, they're going to talk about it, and they're going to really start to be an advertiser for the EA program and what they did for them. And this is when you become trusted. This is when these groups are going to see you as a source of truth, and then you start to be in pull mode, meaning that people are going to start talking to you about, hey, can you help me resolve that issue? Can you help me see my application landscape? Can you help me tie my applications to what they do in real life? This is all these things that are very important for the EA program. And then the last phase is when you really want to expand to the business. So this is when you become influential, and really where business is starting to say, before making that decision, we're going to ask EA what they think about it. Really in collaborative mode between EA and business. And this is where we see the holy grail of the situation for enterprise architect to really become influential and driving the enterprise strategy. Then again, these 4 steps, we want to make sure that they are achievable, and we want to make sure that these 4 steps are not going to take forever. So the first phase that we're going to demonstrate today with our HopX tool is building the EA baseline. So making sure that we move quickly in a few weeks from noisy to useful. And for that, I give the stage to my colleague Vittorio.
Thank you, Yannick. So let me switch to Hopex. So I hope you're ready to get into the specifics. What I'm going to address right now is the first step. The first step where you're going to want to move as an EA architect from a catalog approach, listing all of your IT assets, your infrastructure, etc., to a business-driven EA department. Some of you will be already familiar with this. Some no, depending, of course, on the maturity of your EA department. But basically, what are we going to talk about? Let me show you. So what you're seeing here is the Hopex tool. Maybe some of you have seen it already. It's the last version, Hopex Aquila, for those who are curious. And this is the homepage. Let me move directly to the business capability. So I'm pretty sure some of you are already very familiar with business capability maps, but for those who are not, the business capability map is a visual representation, basically, of what your company does. It's different from an org chart, for example, because here it's completely holistic. It's just a functional representation of your company. So you have, for example, the operation and executions, your analytics, your sales and services, your financial management, etc., 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 depending, of course, on what your company does. So this represents, the activity of your business, and on this map, you're going to be able to project your IT. And why is this super important? Because you move from listing your assets to actually visualizing and communicating how those assets serve the business. You become business driven, and this is what will make all the difference in bringing value to stakeholders outside of your department. But again, I'm sure that a lot of you already know this. The business capability map is what we like to see as the first key deliverable in the development of an EA practice. Basically, it's one of the first elements that proves the business value of the EA department as a whole. Specifically, sure, we're able with this visualization to show the links between the IT and the business. So to get specific, here what you see in the little boxes are the business applications of the company, and they're let's say nested in the business capabilities as we've defined them. So it's a great way to communicate, but it's also already a first level of analysis. So for example, let's look at my customer support capability right here. I can see that it is supported by a lot of business applications. And this already is an indicator of possible need of, for rationalization, maybe cost optimization, maybe there are redundancies, functional redundancies. It's a first level of analysis. But if I look at my product expert sales support capability, we can see that there are no applications that support it. It's a possible indicator of a need for investment. Super simple analysis. It's a first level. Of course, then you will have to get into deeper analysis with financial elements, with strategy elements for your company. But already, it's not just a communication tool. It's a first level of analysis. But we can go further, of course. As you might have noticed, my applications here have indicators. In my example here, I have 3 of them. The circle represents the application's current state. Is the application in production? Is it in its retirement phase, etc.? The triangle is the business value, and the square is the obsolescence risk. And so how can we go a bit further? Of course, we can filter our capability map based on any kind of indicator that is relevant to the company. So let's see here. Let's look at the application current state. Let's keep it simple. Here, I want to focus on the applications sorry, on the business capabilities that have applications that are in production. Perfect. I can see another level of analysis to see which capabilities are undersupported or oversupported again. And that's today, where the 9th of April, 2025, I have my static analysis. But I can also take a look at the state of my architecture in the future, for example, in 2028 and further. And I can see my business capability map evolve, which is a super important element to be able to anticipate the evolution of the IT and make all the right decisions, all the right investment decisions mostly, to make sure that the IT is always ready to support the business. This is one example, but it shows that there's a fairly quick way to provide great value to the EA departments as, let's say, as an enabler for the business as a whole. But of course, you don't just get your EA tool and magically have a business capability map. You first have to, get the right visibility over your IT landscape. And so, this means basically building the inventories. That's the cataloging parts of your IT EA practice. I'm sure that most of you already have something. I'm used to seeing people with Excel sheets, with lists of applications, technologies, and whichever assets are relevant. That's great because you can avoid starting from nothing. OpEx is, you don't have to recreate everything. That would be a bit long. You can simply import the content directly in the tool and start with something. Or even better, you have a CMDB, you have ServiceNow. That's great because you have integrators out of the box in OpEx that allow you to, fetch all that content and quick start your IT inventory. Or maybe you have none of those. And we have a solution for that too. We are able to scan your infrastructure to uncover all of the assets that you have in your infrastructure. Again, what you have here is the possibility to quick start your EA practice and not lose time on the tedious part, the initial part. But it doesn't stop here because we've spoken about not being stuck in the cataloging part, but being business driven. What you have here is the possibility to quick start the creation of your business capability map thanks to AI. So we've been working a lot, as you might imagine, with AI in the last years. And what we have right now is the possibility to automatically link your business applications to your business capabilities. So what you see here on screen, as you might recognize, is the business capability map with all your new applications, let's say all the links between your applications and your business capabilities suggested by an AI. And why is that important? It's important because you can reach that business-driven approach not in years, but in a matter of weeks. And this is a game changer because reaching the first useful phase, or the second point in what Yannick showed just a few moments ago, is the key to building the foundations to prove value to stakeholders outside of the EA department, which will be the point of the rest of the demo after Yannick's next speech.
Thank you very much, Vittorio. Indeed, with this, I can clearly understand that at the useful phase, we want to have a capability map that's going to help us talk with the business and making sure that we talk the same language. And it's true that usually we can see practices struggling a little bit to inventory their applications, technologies, and that AI would really help solve that in not a matter of months, but weeks now. This is really great. I really appreciate that. So now we might ask ourselves, what's next, right? So we've built our inventory of applications, products. We mapped it to the business capability map. And now we have to move to the next stage, becoming more, I would say, trusted than influential. So when I think about EA in a whole, I think that the purpose is really to align enterprise execution by design to the company strategy. So making sure that when we're building new processes, making sure that when we're building new architectures, new AI, LLMs, new applications, microservices, etc., that all of that is aligned again by design to the enterprise to the company strategy, making sure of that. And to achieve this goal, the EA practice has a couple of services that we can offer, right? So we talk about capability visibility, we talk about application rationalization if we want to reduce costs. If we want to reduce architecture risks, we talk about security and risk management, etc., etc. So now we start to structure the EA team, right? We become more mature, we have proven our usefulness, and we start to talk about services. And when we start talking about services, we have to talk about value. When somebody is activating the service from the EA practice, which is called application rationalization, what do we provide them and how do we provide it? So it's very important to identify them and making sure that we are mapping the services to the value that we want to bring. So the value, when we talk about this one, it's really important that every one of the services that you're going to provide to the external world is going to be recognized with, again, undeniable value by the stakeholders outside of the EA practice. It is sometimes a kind of a default, or I would say a kind of a way that we have that we think that the value is achieved because we as EA have the knowledge about it, but it's truly important that we start recognizing this value from others that are, again, outside of this EA team. So this is very, very important. How many times did I face enterprise architects who had to justify their existence to the CIO office every month, every 6 months, etc., etc. So being able to recognize that is important, and we're going to come back to that at the end of the presentation. Before handing over to the next part of the session with Vittorio, I would like to give you another clear point. Right, I talk about value for a couple of minutes now. Identifying the clear value is absolutely key. But one of the, I would say, most underrated skill that I always see in EA practices is communication and marketing of the success. So when you are actually delivering value, and you might face resistance because you have to fight to deliver this value as well against others, I would say a competitive department in the company as well. But what is really important is that when you bring value, market it. Make sure that with a simple email blast every week or month that you can tell the story, that you can actually prove that you've gotten that. It can be as simple, again, as a weekly email or monthly email to the entire team to show what you did. And there, the point is really not to boil the ocean, right? Making sure that we're talking value outside of the EA team, and not talking about how many diagrams we've built, but really about how we helped the company transform and how we helped the company achieve company goal with the EA program. So we're going to see that when we move to this new phase of our maturity in the EA practice, we might talk to new people, right? We might talk to people from the CFO office, from the financial world, or maybe from the security world, or maybe from the operating or the business world. And this might be something that we have to learn to talk their language, and we have to learn to talk to discover their own needs and their own objectives, and map these objectives again to how we are going to fit things in our EA practice. And for that, I think we have a few examples that will help us understand how we can actually market this EA practice to other stakeholders outside of our, I would say, IT and EA realm.
Absolutely. Thank you, Yannick. Before I go back to OpEx, I'd like to mention one, I think, unique aspect about enterprise architecture. My belief is that enterprise architecture is one of the only practice in a company that actually bridges silos between departments. What I mean by that is that we allow the centralization of data from departments that at best struggle to communicate. We have data from operations, data from finance, with of course all the various costs, data from risks, from process management, from infrastructure, of course from IT, and this allows us to have, let's say, unique vision above the company, not above, sorry, about the company. This centralization of data gives us unique opportunities to provide insights that are otherwise unreachable to all of these stakeholders that participate to the directly or indirectly to the enterprise architecture. Of course, there are a lot of use cases that we could take as examples, but for today, since we don't have a lot of time, I'd like to focus on three. Is how to prove value to the CFO, so to the finance department, how to provide value to the CRO, so the risks department, and to the COO, so to the operations. Let's start with the CFO. So basically, everyone, I think, is familiar with this. The goal of the CFO is to manage costs, is to keep the costs as low as possible and the profits as high as possible. And that's great. I mean, that's great. That's what pays our salaries. We're thankful for this. What is the limit? The limit is that CFOs often rely on quantitative data. This is what they're good with, numbers. But of course, decisions to remove applications from the company, of course, cannot rely solely on quantitative data. It's not only about removing the applications that are the most expensive in the company, because they could be expensive but so useful that we shouldn't remove them. What EA brings to CFOs in general is the possibility to cross-functional data to add qualitative elements to what are otherwise quantitative decisions. And what HopEx provides in this sense are two things. The first thing is how to actually gather this data from different people, because it's easy to say that EA basically speaks with everyone, but in practice, how do we do it? What you have in a tool like HopEx is the possibility to automatically gather data from people, so through automated workflows and surveys, to, for example, let's say, identify the business value of your different applications on one side. And also, why not integrate or use integration with a finance tool to import the financial data for the same applications. And what do we get from this? Of course, is the possibility to compare application costs with their business criticality, in the business. And in HopEx, we'll have out-of-the-box reports like the one you see on screen, with a classification of your IT inventory, so in this case, specifically applications, and recommendations based on these elements that I've just mentioned. So the business value, the technical efficiency of the applications, their functional support, and of course, the costs. And this is super important because we can identify ideal candidates for rationalization that will the least impact the business. So this moves the quantitative, the flat quantitative analysis, which of course is super important, to a qualitative vision, or let's say a two-level analysis with both the qualitative and quantitative data. And this allows the EA architects to again move out of the catalog, the flat catalog vision, and provide actual business-driven analysis to the to outside stakeholders, but in this case, the CFO. This is, of course, one example of the type of value that you can bring to CFOs. You could go much further. You could go to all the transformation possibilities. In this case, you have the possibility to eliminate those applications, but you could also talk about renovation, maintenance of existing application, etc. in any case, you will have this much deeper vision of the opportunities that arise from an economical standpoint in your IT inventory. This is for finance. I also mentioned the CRO, the risks officer. What do CROs want to do? Basically, their need is to, of course, manage and mitigate risks and anticipate the direct and indirect impacts that the realization of those risks would have on the company. But the limit is that you don't have that many ways to actually assess the impact of a risk on the company. Sure, you can imagine, you can suppose a lot of things. Some are obvious, some less so, but it's hard to have a real clear data-driven vision of the impact of a risk on the company. Again, what EA provides in this case is the centralization of different prisms, paradigms, which allows to see how a risk is related to the IT and how the IT is related to processes, to operations, etc. So again, to get very specific, I'm going to take one example. Let's talk about one type of risk, the obsolescence risk, which I think will sound familiar to everyone here. If I come back to my business capability map, I can filter my map based on the technological obsolescence of my assets as well as their current state. So in this case, applications in production. And again, I will move through time until, let's say, 2028, and identify all the applications that pose a risk to my different capabilities. Perfect. That's, again, a first level of analysis. I can see where my risks are and how I want to prioritize the different capabilities to support. But I mentioned impact analysis. Let's take a precise look at this. So through this centralized and transversal vision, I'm able to have this kind of mind maps that show all of the relationships that exist between any kind of asset in the company and the rest of the infrastructure. And I say infrastructure, I shouldn't say this, just the rest of the company. I can see which processes are impacted by my at-risk application, which projects, which application flows, which is super important. Let's say, in any kind of process, you have applications that communicate with each other. I mean, that's the case everywhere. Which IT processes and which processes in general will be impacted by that? Which data will not be sent anymore because of this? I can anticipate this risk. Same goes for servers, the technologies, etc. This allows you to really navigate the intricacies of your company, starting from one point, a risk, and then moving to all of the impacted elements until you reach all the indirectly impacted assets of the company and make all the right decisions as a CRO to anticipate and mitigate those risks. And I've mentioned technological obsolescence. That's an interesting IT risk, but we could speak about any kind of risk. It could be financial risks. It would be exactly the same process. Even physical risks. Why not natural disasters, etc. All these elements can be assessed through this kind of tool like Hopex. And just to be clear, you can go very far. For example, I can look here at the technologies that support my business applications, navigate to the same type, of assets and visualization, and see the indirect link with the other assets in the company. And I can go as far as I want until I reach a level that I consider satisfactory in my analysis. Again, this is a type of vision that is enabled by the centralization of data, which again is a unique element that EA benefits from. Before I move to the next use case, what I like to make insist on is, I think, the necessity as enterprise architect, and this is what I see. I mean, let's say the pitfall that I see often is the risk of being too IT driven and not business driven enough. And this is the point that I want to make very clearly. If there's one thing that is super central from the examples that we're mentioning here, is the necessity to not speak our language, but to speak their language. They care less about our diagrams, they care less about our technical infrastructure, which of course are incredibly useful, but they're useful to us. What is important is how to be useful to them, how to give them elements that, you know, that speak their languages and not ours. This is, I think, how we manage to prove value as much as possible. Anyways, the third example is operations. The COO's goals is to, you know, improve operations, make sure the company is as efficient as possible, and to improve overall processes. However, one issue for COOs is, of course, the risk of having a partial vision over the processes and the underlying assets. Again, what EA brings here is let's say the 360 degrees view around all of these elements, around processes, etc. And how we can provide value for this type of stakeholder. Of course, there are many ways, but one example I like is through customer journeys. Basically, what you can do is working with people from operations and marketing, define different steps in your customer journey. So I have a few examples here. Just to mention, it's an example of how to check in an airport. So you have your different steps, you know, finding the right terminal, finding the flights on the screen, etc. And we can identify here, in the red box, a problematic step, which is the check-in step. We can be useful here by identifying the underlying assets that support the step. So a few processes, applications, etc., and dive deep into those assets. So in my example here, we have you know, a model process. So some of you might be already modeling your processes, which is great in providing value for COOs. And we are able to, so you know, go through this process and actually suggest ways to optimize it by providing an as is to be analysis of this process. And so what you can see here is a clear comparison of how we're transforming a process by adding a new element here, which is an application that will automate a lot of the steps in the process in order to make it absolutely seamless for our customers, which is, of course, the main objective as a COO, to make sure that your customers are happy thanks to well-oiled operations across the company.
Indeed.
So time is moving fast. Those are just, again, 3 examples. You know, it's not about reproducing them exactly the same in your tools, in your companies, of course. It's just a way to focus on thinking about your stakeholders' problems, not too much about your own problems. Of course, you want to solve yours, but how to provide value with a language, with elements that speak to the people you want to provide value to.
Thank you very much, Vittorio. It struck me in your demonstration how important it is to have context around the assets that you want to take decisions on. I want to decommission an application. I want to know what business units are using it. I want to know which technologies are supported by it. I want to know the financials of it. And EA is a great aggregator of data for that. So truly appreciate that. Thank you very much, Vittorio, for the demonstration. A few things to send us off after this really good demonstration. As a recap, right? So making EA stick is really making sure that we move from technical advisors to strategic business partners, progressing from noisy to influential in our, I would say, maturity ladder that we had before, and focusing a lot on the business outcome that we want to provide to the business. So the path forward, what I would really, I would say, provide as an advice to anyone working in EA and kind of wanting to go up the ladder of maturity, is really be selective and target your EA approach. Vittorio presented it today with multiple stakeholders, but don't do it all at the same time. Focus on where exactly your company is at today. If, for instance, we're thinking about reducing IT, make sure that we can actually provide the context of this IT for the business and making sure that they make the right decision. So identifying the clear value for stakeholders and continually market the success that you're going to have with this team. So that's very, very important. So again, encouraging anyone to really focus on what we want to solve today. One slide that I always kind of finish my talks on, because I really like this quote. It's about Albert Einstein, and he says that if he had a problem and his life would depend on it, he would spend, and he had an hour to solve it, he would spend 55 minutes to determine the proper question and only 5 minutes to kind of solve the question. So that is really what we have to think about now. It's all about execution, of course, but it's also about focusing and framing the problem that we want to have. So frame the issue, ask why 10 times if needed, and make sure that the value you're going to deliver from the EA practice is going to be sufficient and clear for the stakeholders to use it. So my question to you all, which is a rhetorical question, of course, is thinking about the problem that you are trying to solve at the moment within your company, knock on doors, ask questions. That's going to be the most powerful thing that you can do today. And that's it for us. Thank you very much for listening to us for this 40 minutes. And we're going to dive into some questions that might have been asked during the session, and some questions that we also had prior to the session. So let's see what we can get there. So we have a first question that was asked prior to the session that I really liked. It's about, I would like to know how to introduce architecture in the organization. And this is really what we try to solve today, right? So to summarize that, it's really about making sure that when you are communicating on that, talk the business language. And one of the business language is business capability, because they understand these capabilities, and usually these capability maps have to be built with the business so that we talk the same language. So this is really a bridge that we can see. Not everyone in their companies can discuss capability maps with their business. I understand that it's not always the same case, but there is a little bit of work to do there, but it's close usually to what they know and to how they see the structure of their business. So my advice here is really start from we would call it a T-shaped architecture. So do not dive too much into the details, but be more holistic about applications and so on, and connect that to the business world. That, I think, is a really good first step to introduce architecture in companies. We had a question that was related to that, that was asked today, which is about capability maps, and mentioning that capability maps are a powerful way to demonstrate value for the EA practice. However, that person noticed that sometimes there's a lack of understanding of the business on the capability maps. That I totally understand. So the idea here is clearly to build the business capability map with the business. That's a key element there. It can take a bit of time to arrive to kind of the same vision, but normally this type of structure, they have to be shared and useful to the business. And one key element there is, I know that there are some frameworks or some reference capability that you can use for that are already out there, but sometimes I find them a bit too detailed, and we could use simplifications on those as well. That's very important. Not go into deep dive into 4, 5, 6 levels of capabilities. Sometimes having 1 or 2 levels to start with is easy enough, and it can actually go to that view. All right. Another question that was asked about moving from influencer state and actually being influential across the enterprise, any practical thoughts? Yes. So we were focusing a little bit more today with Vittorio on how to move from the initial stages to be more useful and then selling the value outside. But the key to becoming more useful is clearly, I would say, integrate the practice within the business, and that sometimes also comes with a repositioning of the EA practice. It happens sometimes that EAs are a little bit, I would say, not stuck in IT. I would say it like that to be a very to take a bit of a shortcut, and that also comes with emancipation from the IT and really start working with the business. And meaning that when you talk to financial persons, that you have the right reports under your hand and the right views that you can share with them. When you start talking about the CISO and security, that you have views and data to support their transformation, that would really help you strive to become influential in the company. It is possible, and I think we're out of time, but I'm going to take one last question that's going to be important here is it possible to get a test run of Hopex? Yes, of course. If you're interested in anything that we showed today, there's going to be a recording of the session, of course. But if you're interested in testing our solution, go to our website, www.mega.com, and you'll be able to ask for a test environment, and you'll be able to start using the tool as Vittorio did it today, and actually start getting some value out of it. So that's really nice. Okay, I think we're at time now, and my closing talk is really to thank you all for participating to our webinar today. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate you listening to us, and we hope that you appreciated our webinar today. So to everyone, have a good day, have a good evening, have a good afternoon, and let's talk soon. So bye-bye.
Bye-bye.